All right, Adam. I think we got to start with Max Johnson. Just worst case scenario. Worst case scenario for Max Johnson. Worst case scenario for the Tar Heels. And certainly, you could tell or you could infer by the way Max Johnson moved after the injury, both the amount of pain he appeared to be in, then when he tried to walk off the field, then ultimately the fact that they had to get a cart and we learned that he had gone to the hospital after the game. I mean, all of these things suggested that it was a serious injury, and unfortunately it was a broken leg that is going to keep him out for the rest of the year and is going to keep him, per Mac Brown in his press conference on Monday, will actually have Max Johnson continue to be under medical care in Minnesota for at least another, he said, up to another week or two. So clearly a serious situation. So first and foremost, you hate it for Max Johnson. This is a guy who has had some injury issues in the past. This is third school coaching changes at both of his previous schools. So it hasn't been a great college experience, at least as far as that is concerned. I certainly hope Max Johnson has enjoyed the other parts of it, but the football side, multiple coaching changes, multiple places, multiple injuries, just things that are less than ideal. Clearly a severe injury, and you hate that for anybody. So first and foremost, just it stinks. It stinks for Max Johnson as a young person and a young football player. From the Carolina perspective, you lose a guy that I thought, Adam, it was telling when the injury occurred how many guys went over to, tap Max Johnson on the helmet or whatever. And it wasn't just his receivers and his offensive line. It was defensive players. It was everybody that was going over there. So I do think it's accurate to say that Max Johnson has really gained respect in the Carolina locker room. Obviously, he had played well in the spring and training camp to earn that starting spot. As we talked about on Friday, not a secret, I don't think he played very well in the first half of the game against Minnesota. I do think he was playing well in the third quarter. You could tell that he was starting to get more comfortable, which is not unusual. It's new system, new team, all the things that we know. So you lose a leader and you lose your starting quarterback, which is not something to just say, no big deal, next guy up. I mean, the good news for Carolina is the Tar Heels legitimately feel like they have someone they can win with in Connor Harrell. There have been years here and years at plenty of places where if your starting quarterback got hurt, you were in big trouble. Carolina has somebody in Connor Harrell that they feel like they can go win with. As we've talked about and will talk about, I think they may, and there was a lot of talk about this on Monday in the press conferences, they're going to have to figure out what their identity is now offensively, because I think it probably is a little different. But there is a path moving forward. But right now, Adam, hard to even – I mean, it's not hard. There's the football side of this and the other side of this. From the football side, there's a path moving forward. Connor Harrell's a talented player that Carolina can still win with. From the personal side, it is hard to get past how bad you feel for Max Johnson. Just a really bad injury to somebody who was well-respected and really well-liked.
Yeah, on the non-football side, do you think as you get older, injuries hit you harder? Like from not physically.
Oh, well, I know they hit me harder when they occur to me.
But when you see
I absolutely know what you're saying. Yes, I think so.
I do too. It's just such an unfortunate situation for him. And hearing Coach Brown say on Monday that he's going to have to stay in Minnesota for an extended amount of time, I mean, you know how difficult that must be. And Coach Brown said the Tar Heels left a trainer there to do whatever basically Max Johnson needs him to do, and his parents are there also. But what an unfortunate situation to happen in the season opener when you have so much hope and a fresh start, and then all of a sudden you've got a very, very, very long road ahead of you. So I just think that overshadows everything else. That being said, there is other things, and on the football side, the number one storyline about the 2024 Tar Heels that everyone invested so much time in over the summer is now no longer a story.
Yeah.
The quarterback is Connor Harrell. The luxury quarterback, Jacoby Criswell, who was kind of like, oh, well, that's nice to have. He's now the backup, and you're probably going to need him at some point this season to do something meaningful because that's just the nature of the position. So Tar Heels fortunate that they can go 3 deep at that position because now the 3 deep has become 2 deep.
Yeah, and interesting. Had Jacoby Criswell stayed, not gone to Arkansas, I think there's a good chance he would have been the starter this year. And who knows with the transfer portal, I mean, how different things are. But, I mean, I think there's a legitimate chance, as Mack Brown said in his press conference on Monday and has said privately, this isn't just something that I think he just says, is that it was very close between Jacoby Criswell and Drake May when Drake May ultimately won the job. I mean, that was not like a slam dunk. Now, once Drake May started playing, obviously he was terrific. But so now you've got it. Yes, it is just an interesting situation with Jacoby Criswell that now he's come back and he just was late getting here, had to finish a class in Arkansas before he could properly transfer. And so, I mean, he was just a little bit behind. But I do think what a fortunate situation for Carolina as a team to now have it. You've got this one very unfortunate situation with Max Johnson out, but fortunate in the fact that you do have 2 guys that are capable of going out there and playing at a pretty high level. From the path moving forward aspect, and we talked about this on Friday kind of in hypothetical if it was going to be Connor Harrell moving forward, is I do think now, and Chip Lindsey, Carolina's offensive coordinator, talked a lot about this on Monday, and so did Mack Brown, just what is your best path forward now? Obviously, Carolina is going to have Omarion Hampton and its run game heavily involved. It's the best thing that the Tar Heels do right now. And yet, you don't want to give Omarion Hampton 30 carries every single game like he had against Minnesota. You don't want to continue to just run him into heavily loaded lines of scrimmage. I think it made sense on Thursday because of the circumstances. You were in this game in what was a physical, low possession type of game in messy weather with this catastrophic thing that occurred to your team and to your player. And so you weren't necessarily going to open up the playbook at that point in time once Connor Harrell came in. Carolina's going to have to do more things offensively, and this is not breaking news or something they don't know. I mean, they're going to have to do they're going to have a more diverse offensive attack than what occurred on Thursday moving forward. And now it's just, what is that? How do you best do that? We know Connor Harrell can really run. If he gets out in the open field, he is as good as anybody in the country at quarterback at running. I firmly believe that. He is at 4.40 speed. He is as fast as you're going to get at that position. So you obviously, one would think, would use his legs some. He has a stronger arm than I think people know. And I get it was Campbell, and I get it was last year. Go back and look at that touchdown he threw to Chris Culliver against Campbell last year. And again, that's one moment in time, but the pieces are there. And that was kind of the theme for Mack Brown, I thought, when talking about Connor Harrell on Monday, was you're not starting from nothing here. You've got a guy who's been in the program for a couple of years, who was very successful in high school, who has some very clear physical tools, super intelligent guy, was the valedictorian of his high school class. I mean, you have all of these things that you are working with, but now it's time to actually work with it and have it move forward. And so the process is going to be, how does Connor Harrell evolve? How quickly can he evolve? And how quickly can Carolina get comfortable and figure out how all of these pieces best fit together now?
I would even say the first half of the bowl game. I mean,
yes.
Not just the Campbell game, but that first half of the bowl game, he looked like a legitimate ACC quarterback.
Yes.
I would be interested to know, and Chip Lindsey would never say this out loud, but does this make Chip Lindsey's job a little easier? Because now, here's your quarterback. Figure out what he does. You don't have to worry about, well, what if I make a switch, or what if we decide to play two? This is the guy. So what are the things that this guy does the best that fit your personnel? And Mack Brown said it again on Monday that he wants Carolina's identity to be a running team with some play action, and he's repeated that over and over. But I do think Connor Harrell probably raises your ceiling a little bit in terms of spectacular plays. I mean, he's going to make some plays that are going to be highlight worthy. What you have to make sure of is that the floor doesn't drop a little because of miscues and not taking care of the ball. So if he can take care of the ball, then I think you have a very capable offense. And especially as long as 28's lining up behind him, it's not like you have to do it all yourself, as Carolina has had some very good quarterbacks have to do every once in a while over the last few years. If everything goes to heck, it's always a fine play call to say, just turn around and hand it to Omarion and see what he can do. And that's a really nice luxury to have when you're trying to break in a quarterback.
I think Max Johnson ultimately won the job because of his consistency and his experience. And so if Connor Harrell can gain some of that consistency, and obviously there's only one way to gain experience, but if he can gain some of that consistency along with the very impressive physical gifts that he has, I think Carolina is that would be a very good thing for Carolina. And I thought it was a weird first game. I mean, just the weather, the injury, just all the stuff. Carolina needs to be more explosive offensively. They only had 6 explosive plays, which is not enough, and Mack Brown, Chip Lindsey talked about that. They've got to be more of a threat down the field. There just has to be more there in the pass game. So these are all things that are going to continue to evolve.
I would expect Harrell to look very good these next couple weeks, because I don't really think there's any doubt that he is more gifted and talented than the opposition he's going to face. I think the question with him is, can he do it against opponents who are more similar to him?
Sure.
And that was some of what we saw in the bowl game, was that sometimes the answer was yes, definitely, and sometimes the answer was needs a little work. And now we get to see how that work has progressed.
Right. Mack Brown kind of bristled a little bit when he was asked about his schedule on Monday and talked about Carolina really – he felt like the Tar Heels had maybe gotten a little bogged down and focusing too much on opponents and up and down to that opponent over the last couple of years, and he talked about playing to a standard and things that are, I think, good in theory things to think about. I also think there's no question that Carolina is going to be heavily favored in these next 3 games, and it is an excellent opportunity for Connor Harrell to get some reps and to go out there and to figure things out. And so in that regard, the schedule is a positive for Carolina as far as you're not throwing – Connor Harrell's not going to Tallahassee next week. He's got some time to work, which I think is good.
Do you think I understand the questions about the schedule. Do you think the large amount of questions about the schedule are because they're all here together? Like these next 3 weeks, people look at that and go, well, I don't see Alabama on there. But if one of these was later in the season like it has been –
Probably. I think that's probably some of it, and I think some of it is just people needing something to talk about. Like, let's not forget, Carolina played South Carolina, Appalachian, and Minnesota last year. I mean, like, it's not like the Tar Heels often have – I mean, Carolina plays good teams for the most part out of conference. It just happens that this year it's not quite as strong as it normally is. And yet, Adam, the Tar Heels did just go on the road and beat another power conference team, one of 2 teams to do that in the ACC. Now, do I think Minnesota is the best team in the Big Ten? No. But the fact is you still went on the road against another power conference team and won the game. And so you got to talk about something, right? And so I do think that is just a talking point. But I do agree with you. If it was spread out, probably it isn't talked about as much. Yes.
It's not the ideal schedule from a fan perspective.
No, and that's understand. I mean, I get it.
But if you were playing Alabama, Georgia, and Southern Cal these next 3 weeks and lost all 3 of them,
right,
everybody'd be freaking out going into October. Instead, you've got a chance to build a little momentum and have a really big game at Duke.
So, Adam, let's take that to we're almost through week 1. As Adam and I are recording this, BC and Florida State still playing tonight. Totally forgot Bill O'Brien was the head coach at Boston College, by the way, until I heard that at some point this weekend. So mostly through week 1. By the time you're hearing this, that game will have occurred and week 1 will be complete. Adam, any thoughts from you ACC-wise? To me, I think the league is pretty open is what came to me. I mean, I don't think there's any argument that the team that looked the best in the league in the first week was Miami. They look good. They have a high-quality win at Florida. They look good doing it. They were U-ing all over the place, gator chomping in Florida's face. So, I mean, they look good doing it. Obviously, Clemson was playing a very good team and got smoked. Florida State has already lost to Georgia Tech. Don't know what happened. What happens against Boston College? Through week 1, the league is. I don't think there's a lot of. I'm not saying teams are bad. I don't think that, but I think it is an open. There's an open lane for the Tar Heels and everybody in this conference.
And we've talked about this before, but who you play is going to have
a huge difference.
A lot to do with who goes to the conference championship game.
Absolutely, it does.
Because there's some teams that are sitting there right now going, this schedule shapes up pretty well. And then there's some teams that are sitting there right now going, this is a little tougher than I wish it was.
Yeah.
Virginia Tech, anchor down, baby.
Yeah.
You don't go on the road to Nashville and come out of there with a victory. They had to close down the Vanderbilt student section, Jones. They did not let any more students in. All 11 of them were there. Is that because
the construction wasn't complete yet in the stadium?
I'm just reporting the facts. Yeah. I have an on-scene correspondent who reported from the library that they were not letting any more students in. But, I mean, the Hokies, at one point, I saw someone had them going to the playoff. You're going to have to beat Vanderbilt.
Pat McAfee, yeah. That's so take that with a grain of salt. But, yes.
You're going to have to beat Vanderbilt to go to the playoff. That being said, Vanderbilt's quarterback looked good. I mean,
he did look good.
That can happen in week 1. Like some guy you've never heard of turns out to be better than you thought, and his team beats the other team that you have heard of.
Well, I'm going to take it back to the Tar Heels real fast. That's why all that mattered is that the Tar Heels won the game. No week is crazier than week 1. Now, and even this week was pretty chalky in overall when you look across the country, but weird things can happen. Dudes come out of nowhere, so especially now with so many guys in different places. Coaches change all around, so you don't really know 100% what this coordinator might do. Just win the game. Just win the game. And the Tar Heels won the game.
What do you think's up with Clemson? Other than they played Georgia, which is that's a mistake in itself.
Yeah, they played Georgia, who's very good. I don't know. I mean, this is a couple years now where Clemson has had some really poor starts to the year. The Tigers finished fine last year, although I still think they were there to be had for the Tar Heels in that game, and a couple of mistakes early hurt Carolina big time in that game in Death Valley. And I fully understand that Cade Klubnik has torched the Tar Heels at least once in that ACC championship game and was the quarterback when they won last year. I'm not sure he's at the level as some guys that they had when, I mean, you look back at it, Clemson had an incredible run, and you know why? They had incredible players. And they had Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence as their quarterback for like 7 straight years or whatever it was. So sometimes the players, most times the players are the difference. I do think this whole discussion about transfer portal versus recruiting is an interesting one with Clemson. Because they're like the only team that didn't have one single transfer start in week 1. Is that right? Or something like that. And I can see Dabo Swinney's point of well, we felt better about the guys that we've been recruiting for this long, and we feel better about developing them and all those different things than just going and getting somebody else. And I get that. And I'm sure that plays well on the recruiting trail. But it is a different world in college football now where I think you have to go plug and play sometimes. I mean, you see it with Carolina. Jakeem Harris was the leading tackler for the Tar Heels at the safety spot. Howard Sampson had a very solid performance at the tackle spot for Carolina in his first game as a Tar Heel. Austin Blaske played great at the center position. I mean, part of this now is identifying where you need immediate help. And you got to go get immediate help if you can, I think. So who knows? I mean, I haven't followed it quite closely enough. I'm kind of talking above my head a little bit, but I do think that is something that I think that's worth watching moving forward.
Well, and to play on the level Clemson's been playing on, you've got to have 100% hit rate on those recruits that you've recruited out of high school. Yep. Because it's no big deal to trust the guys on your team if they all turn out to be like the quarterback from Southern Cal who will sit there for a couple of years and then come in and be awesome.
Yeah.
But if you trust them and they sit there for a couple of years and then they're not as awesome, then Georgia's awesome guys are going to run all over you and beat you by a lot.
Yeah.
And it feels like they may have missed on a couple of high school guys, which they're high school guys.
Everybody does.
Every single team does that. But what they've now figured out is, okay, when we miss on those guys, we'll bring in a couple who have already developed and we know exactly what they are. We'll put them right in. No problem. And to this point, Clemson has not been able or willing to do that.
There was an interesting conversation during, I think it was Kirk Herbstreit was talking during that USC game about, with all the transfer portal and just movement there is, that if you can find that quarterback though, and because I think both LSU and USC were in this scenario, who's clearly talented and is willing to sit behind somebody for a year or two and is that talented, then what a luxury for you. Now you're in this situation where you have a guy who's been with you for multiple years, who understands the system, who knows his teammates, who knows all those things, that is such a huge advantage when you hit that just right, but not easy to hit.
Do you think Kirk Herbstreit's dog is trying to take a little thunder from Remington?
Yeah. What if Ben and Remington they wouldn't have a fight. They're both too old. I think they'd both just sit there and kind of maybe sniff at each other for a little bit, and then they'd probably just lie down and each hang out.
Well, I don't know that Ben has any skills like Remington. I mean, the scout on Ben is he sits there.
Yeah, walks in the camera shot. Everybody's like, dog.
I mean, Remington brings waters to the umpires.
Yeah, that's true.
He can
Remington's
bring the
resume
baseballs.
is a little thicker.
He's a much more versatile player.
Yeah. Should have Remington come up in the radio booth for a game, just kind of hang out.
That would be a
get him on that
radio.
behind the mic thing that we have back this week. It's sit there on your computer and stare at us watching a game. Get excited, everybody.
But imagine if when the Tar Heels scored a touchdown, you rubbed Remington's head.
Oh, yeah.
What a celebration.
And anything else football-wise, I mean, it's nice to be 1-0. It's really nice to be 1-0. I've heard that half the teams lose in week one, Adam. So nice for Carolina to have success, and although certainly some really unfortunate things that happened in week one for the Heels.
Well, as we've talked about before, the Tar Heels haven't always had a ton of success in openers. So let's don't try to wish this one away. It was a win, and just revel in it for a week, and then you get to see the Tar Heels at home at Kenan Stadium, and who knows, maybe they'll even be a big, maybe like a reunion or something at Kenan on Saturday.
The difference in Carolina's level of success in season openers when Mack Brown is the head coach versus anybody else from the late 80s until now is dramatic.